Okay, so this is going to be an examination of the first topic in Unit 3, and that is the Constitution, and that is what we have up here. Now, some of the material in this is going to be a bit of a review since we've already talked about Shays' Rebellion. We talked a little bit about the Constitutional Convention, the concerns of the elites. So I'll ask, what were the fears of the elites in America? And why don't we just ask this? Who are the elites in America? Yeah.
Wealthy landowners.
The wealthy landowners, those are elites. Who else might be considered elite in America? After the American Revolution. Power, money, influence. Who are they? Yeah. Generals, absolutely. Military heroes, sure. Washington, Lafayette, Hamilton, Knox, Nathaniel Greene. Those are very influential people. People look to them as heroes. Who else might be elite besides wealthy landowners and generals? Yeah. Politicians, people who were at the head of the political movement. Okay? Your Ben Franklins, your Thomas Jeffersons, your John Adams, your Sam Adamses. Okay? And generally, the people who are in positions of political power generally tend to hold what office, or generally tend to be what kind of hold what kind of jobs? What? Huh?
Executive branch. No, legislative.
No, what in their day job, rather than being politician? What did they do before they were politicians? What? Again, wealthy landowners, but what else? There are more than just wealthy landowners. Philosophers? Really? They're making a living philosophizing? They got to do other things. Yeah. Wealthy merchants. Absolutely. Wealthy merchants. Traders. Okay? Who else might be there?
The printing press.
The people who ran printing businesses, like Franklin. What about lawyers? You know, lawyers existed at this time, okay? People who understood the law, who had an understanding of how government and law and society function together. So, if those elites are concerned, what is bugging them? What are they concerned about in this interim period after the American Revolution, but before the Constitution? Yeah. They are concerned primarily with the lower classes. And what is their concern with these lower classes? Your poor farmers, your struggling people. Yeah. They could rise up and rebel. Why would they rise up and rebel?
Because they think that they're all equal.
Because they all think that they're equal. Sure, there is that sense of egalitarianism that pervades American society after the American Revolution. Why else might these lower class Americans rebel? What would they be angry about?
Trying to be taxed in any way.
Okay, taxes in any way, any kind of government control, any attempt by government, whether that's at the national level, at the state level, or the local level, to influence or tell them what to do. So that is a concern of the elites. There is also the concern about the weaknesses of the national government. And we've already talked about the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation government. Okay? Why is this such a bad government? Yeah.
They can't levy taxes.
Okay, they can't levy taxes, so they have no way of raising money, which means they have no way of paying for anything. Yeah. They can't enforce any of the laws that they make, so basically it's just a debating society making suggestions to people.
They can't raise an army.
Actually, they can raise an army. That's one of the things they do have the ability to do. What's that? Can't hear you. They can declare war. The one thing that the Yeah.
Can't coin money.
Can't coin money. Yeah. Can't regulate trade. So what you've got is you've got political weakness at the core of America that is leading to political instability with laws not being enforced, economic instability with 13 different countries doing 13 different things, 13 different sets of currencies, trade wars between the states because the national government can't regulate anything, and you've got this social upheaval of the poorer class Americans who believe that, well, anytime I impose a tax, I can just raise an army, rise up, and oppose it because it was good enough for George Washington, it's good enough for me. So that's what you've got going in America. So, look, work smart, not hard. If you don't have any weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation down, then jot this down. But otherwise, this is just a review. Okay? The inability to tax and enforce national law. 13 different state economies, currencies, all in conflict with one another. So you've got this economic and political instability. You've got the fear or the concern of the egalitarian mobocracy, mob rule, a la Shays Rebellion. Anybody ever see the Simpsons episode with the monorail? The monorail episode, okay, where they're trying to decide what to do with a budgetary windfall, and Marge suggests that they fix the roads because, the roads are all broken and stuff, and somebody comes along and suggests they build a monorail, and it makes absolutely no sense, but all the people want a monorail because it sounds cool, and Bart says, sorry, Mom, the mob has spoken. Sometimes the average citizen makes unwise decisions. And so the elites want to curb that. Inability to force states to comply with national law. Heck, inability to get states to comply with state law. Then you've got little things on the side that are kind of, I hate to use this euphemism, but canaries in the coal mine that, hey, there are problems with this government. For instance, the Newburgh conspiracy, which we talked about already, just a reminder that this was an attempt by George Washington's generals to march on Philadelphia, take over the government, and install George Washington as dictator because the army wasn't getting paid. That should have been a sign to everybody that the national government was ineffective. That you're talking about the army overthrowing the government. And I mean, it really is only George Washington's good character that prevents that from occurring. Lesser men would have taken that opportunity. I know I would have. That's one of those instances of, would you have done that? If somebody offered you, hey, we'll march to the Capitol, take over the government, and install you as the leader, I would have jumped on that in a heartbeat. But I'm not George Washington.
Were you just elected
Most likely to take over the world, yes. I mean, look, man, my dying wish is to take over the world for like 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes.
What are you going to do?
I've got a whole list of things I want done. Now, I can get them done toot sweet. 5 minutes. That's, be afraid. Be very afraid. All right. And I found that quote, gentlemen, you must pardon me, I've grown gray in your service, and now I find myself growing blind. Again, that whole thing that he can't believe what he's witnessing here. And really, it should also be, a bellwether that guys like Alexander Hamilton, because Alexander Hamilton's the guy who organized this conspiracy, he's dangerous. No, he's not up there. He's not a president. He's on $10 bill, which means he did something, but he's not up there. Now, we had already talked about the state constitutions at the end of the American Revolution, that initially those state constitutions had weak governments, just like the national government. You had 13 different sets of laws, trade wars between the states. Originally, the states had strong legislatures and weak executives because people were looking to get rid of strong central government. They wanted a weak central government. But it was at the state level where you began to realize that there needed to be stronger, more effective government. And that's why you're seeing states, right after the American Revolution, begin to amend their constitutions and create stronger executive branches. The executive branch is the branch that makes sure the laws get executed. That's where the word executive comes from. They execute the laws. In England, the king and the prime minister execute the laws made by Parliament. In America, at the state level, the governor executes the laws. Eventually, at the national level, they're going to decide that they need a strong executive to execute the laws. They're going to name that title president. And then one thing that all states did was they ensured that there was a list of rights that people had, a bill of rights. Guaranteed, almost in the form of a social contract between the government and the people, that these are the rights you're entitled to and that we as the government will protect. So that was kind of a way of smoothing over any ruffled feathers that might come from creating a stronger state government. And I mean, you're going to see a lot of states do. Most states have a strong governor by the time the Constitution is written. Now, besides all the political turmoil and upheaval and the social upheaval and turmoil that you're seeing after the American Revolution, add to that the fact that America is going through a recession. Right after the American Revolution, trade stops to a trickle. Britain is not allowing America to trade freely on the high seas. Very difficult for Americans to get into British markets and other European markets because the British are blocking access. So you have a lot of economic uncertainty and instability because of British trade regulations and restrictions. So there is a call from certain quarters in America that the United States, I can now call it the United States, the United States must create its own manufacturing base. We must not be reliant on other countries for our economic well-being. We must be self-sufficient. And the guy that outlines that vision is Hamilton. That's why he's on the $10 bill. He's the guy that posits the theory of America becoming an industrial superpower. He outlines this in a document called the Report on Manufactures. Now, this is published in 1791-ish, while he is Secretary of the Treasury in the Washington administration. But what it is a vision. It's an outline of a vision. What can America be? We've got the land, we've got the variety of resources, we've got the people, we've got the educational system, we've got the literacy rates. We have the ability here. We have all the ingredients here to not only be economically self-sufficient, but to be what Hamilton believes is the preeminent economic power in the world. Hamilton sees this when we're nothing but a bunch of fishermen, lumberjacks, and tobacco farmers. That's visionary. What can you say? I mean, Hamilton's looking 100 years into the future. I mean, you get people that barely look a year into their own future. This guy's looking 100 years into the future as to what we can become. And I would argue that if you take it out 100 years, you get to about here. You get to about here. Garfield, Arthur, Cleveland, Harrison, Cleveland, McKinley. Urbanization, immigration, age of industry, that really, by the end of the 19th century, America has fulfilled that Hamiltonian vision. By 1900, we're the largest economy in the world. Yeah. Yeah. The Hamilton vision wins out. And there are going to be inheritors to that Hamilton vision. There are going to be people who subscribe to that vision. People like, and maybe you haven't heard of some of these people, but people like Henry Clay. Maybe people like Abraham Lincoln. I know you don't think of him as an economic visionary, but he is. Matter of fact, I would argue that Abraham Lincoln creates modern America. The modern economy. So, you've got potential. You've got potential. If we can just get our house in order. And in 1786, it's not looking like we've got our house in order. You've got Shays' Rebellion. And we've talked about Shays' Rebellion and the concern that Shays' Rebellion has for elites. Is the mobocracy out of control? Can citizens just rise up and organize a militia anytime they disagree with government, state or national? Or should there be some sort of limit? Should there be some sort of barrier to what the people can do? It is Shays' Rebellion that causes the elites to meet in Annapolis in 1786. That should be an indicator of how pressing a concern this is. Shays' Rebellion takes place in March of 1786, and by summer of 1786, they're calling a meeting in Annapolis. And in the days of no telegraph, no television, no radio, no telephone, that's quick. Quick. They're concerned about the weaknesses of the Articles and Shays' Rebellion, and they all come away with the idea that a stronger national government is necessary. So while the Annapolis Convention only draws delegates from 6 states, what they do agree upon, and Hamilton is the guy leading this effort, what they do agree upon is the need to meet the following year. We're going to take a year. We're going to get more states. And we're going to meet in Philadelphia, because maybe Annapolis, doesn't have enough restaurants or whatever. I like the restaurants in downtown Annapolis. I think it's perfectly fine. But maybe Philadelphia, maybe they want to go to bookbinders. So in 1787, states around the country elect delegates. Wait a minute, I thought states already had representatives in the Articles Congress. These are people outside of the Articles Congress. Now they're meeting ostensibly to amend the Articles government. But shouldn't it be the members of the Articles Congress who amend the Articles of Confederation? And isn't there a prescribed method of amending the Articles of Confederation? Anybody know what the amendment process is? Has to be unanimous. So why go outside that process? Yeah.
You can never get everyone to agree on
You're never going to get everybody to agree. It's never going to happen. So we're going to create this extra governmental organization, this constitutional convention with 55 wealthy, influential guys. You know, people like Daniel Shays are not being invited to the Constitutional Convention. People like Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, those people are being invited. People of wealth, people of influence, people who have the most to lose. The most to gain, they've got the most to lose. People with a stake in the success of the country. Their goal, curb the excesses of democracy. Prevent another Shays Rebellion from happening. Keep the people in line. Stability is the primary goal of the Constitutional Convention, but with an eye toward balance. So I'm going to go to the guiding question that I've got up on the board today, and it goes to the objective as well. Analyze the balance between freedom and security engendered in the Constitution. The guiding question being, how does the Constitution balance freedom and stability? Under the Articles of Government, people have freedom, but no stability. How does stability increase freedom? Because I know it seems counterintuitive, but how does stability and control increase freedom?
There would be more economic opportunities, more stability.
Stability equals opportunity. People will invest. People will risk their money if the society is predictable. And you will have economic opportunity. The rising tide lifts all boats. You're going to do that first top 10 list, okay, the Constitution. All right. Yeah. So, all right, so stability creates economic opportunity. How else does stability promote freedom? Yeah.
They're all under one set of rules.
Okay, there is consistency. So everybody knows what the expectations are. That provides a bit of freedom. I know what I can do and I know what I can't do. Has anybody ever seen The Road Warrior? Anybody ever watch Mad Max? Any of those like Beyond Thunderdome type movies, you know, in the hellscape apocalypse that is our future? Are those people free? There's no government. It's anarchy, but those people aren't free. They're living in constant fear. Fear for their personal safety. Fear for their personal property. That's not freedom. You need stability to ensure you can pursue happiness, make a living, provide for your family, know what the rules are. You need that stability. That is the argument that's going to come out of the Constitutional Convention, that you cannot have chaos and have freedom. So stability and order done in secret. Can you imagine if they tried to do this today? If they tried to create an extra governmental organization that went outside the Constitution to decide on something, and it was done completely in secret with no press allowed, people would have a field day. People would be on their blogs all over the place. Oh my God, what's going on? It's Hitler and Stalin combined. But they did it. They did it in secret at Independence Hall. People like George Mason, Ben Franklin, who by the way is in his 80s now, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and they got George Washington. That was a great get because he lends this organization credibility. People might not know who Madison is, people might not know who Hamilton is, but by gum, everybody knows who George Washington is, and everybody looks up to and respects George Washington. And if he's at the head of this endeavor, it must be good. That was the attitude. So, all right. So, the next objective here is that the Constitution is built on a series of compromises. That is how this works. That's how government is supposed to work. You have your views, they have their views, you get together, you give a little, they give a little, and you come up with a middle ground. The whole friggin' country was created on the idea of compromise, yet you would never know it today. With this my way or the highway form of government that you've got going. This country was created on compromise. Not everybody gets what they want. You gotta give. So the Constitution is built on a lot of compromises. The biggest compromise, nay, the greatest compromise, being how people are represented in the national government. So how should people be represented at the national level? Should it be based on the size of the state, population? Big states get more representatives, smaller states get fewer representatives? Or should every state have equal representation? Huh?
Both.
Both? What are you talking about, both?
We have two houses.
Oh, we have two houses. A bicameral legislature. Two-cameral house. Two-house legislature. Originally, under the Articles of Government, you've got one house, with every state being equally represented. What is the advantage of having representation based on population? Let's call it a big state plan. What's the advantage for a state like Virginia, for instance, which is the largest state by population? What's the advantage to having representation based on population?
It's closer to majority rule.
Okay, it's closer to majority rule. We've got more people. We should have more influence. We've got more people to answer to. What's the benefit of having representation based on equal representation? So small states like, I don't know, New Jersey, don't get rolled by big states like Virginia. Everybody gets the same representation, and it's fair. So Virginia puts forward a plan for representation based on population, which would benefit Virginia, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, big states, New York. New Jersey puts forward a plan that says, no, everybody should be equally represented so that small states like New Jersey and Delaware and Maryland don't get rolled by the big states. And the compromise is, why not both? And you get a combination of the two, a bicameral legislature, which we shall call Congress, with a House with representation based on population, and one based on equal representation. And the beauty of the system is that in order for a law to be enacted, it must pass through houses, and both houses must agree, which makes the lawmaking process slower but more deliberative and representative of the entire country. Some people would refer to this compromise as the Great Compromise. Hey, how would you describe that compromise? Hey, it was great. Really, no 80s movies fans out there? No back to school fans? Really? Sometimes it's referred to as the Connecticut Compromise, since the representatives from Connecticut proposed it. So that's your great compromise. That's your big compromise. How to represent the people. But you've got other compromises as well. For instance, what do we do about slavery? Some states want it, some states don't. Got to compromise. We got to do something to keep the southern states on board that want slavery, but the northern states that have already abolished slavery, they don't want slavery, so we come up with a compromise. The big compromise, 3/5 compromise. Slaves will be counted as 3/5 of a person for purposes of representation only. What does that mean? Yeah. Bingo! It's not that you get half a representative, it's just you add up 3/5 plus 3/5 plus 3/5 plus 3/5. You'll eventually wind up with a number that you can round up. Right. Round the decimal. But yeah, you get southern states with disproportionately more representation for people who aren't counted as human beings. It's unfair representation. It's over-representation. Southern states are going to get more of a voice than they deserve. But slaves are not counted as human beings, nor should they be considered as such. And then just to take this down here, there's more slave compromises. The slave trade, there's not going to be any regulation on it for 20 years. If you want slaves, you can import as many slaves from Africa as you want for the next 20 years. So from 1788 to 1808, you can import as many African slaves as you want. However, after 1808, importing slaves to the United States is banned. But that's okay. Slavery's on the way out in 1787 anyway. After all, it's economically not very viable, it's very costly, and what they're growing with slaves, tobacco, indigo, rice. I mean, rice makes you some money, but tobacco doesn't really make you much money. Indigo isn't very profitable. Most people among the founding fathers believed that slavery would be on its way out within 20, 30 years anyway, and this would just all kind of work itself out. And then along came the cotton gin, 1793, and that is a game changer because it makes cotton a viable product, and it is a moneymaker. By 1860, cotton 3/4 of America's economy. 3/4. We are the Saudi Arabia of cotton by 1860. So, the Founding Fathers had an opportunity to do something about slavery, and they punted yet again. No tax on exports, but taxes on imports were fine. So you could ship whatever you wanted overseas, but if you were importing things, the government could tax those imports. And then the other big compromise, for those people who were concerned that this strong Constitution was going to limit freedom, they insisted on the creation of a Bill of Rights before this Constitution would be ratified. And guys, the Constitution is built ingeniously because what you've got are 3 branches of government. You've got a legislature that makes laws. You've got an executive branch that executes the laws. And then you've got a judiciary that interprets laws. And they all function with checks and balances. Now, I have not put every check and balance up here. And if you don't know that the president has the ability to veto congressional legislation, you need to go back to 9th grade. Work smart, not hard. Look at what I've got up there. Is there any of that you don't know? Now, the key to the Constitution, or at least what the founders of the Constitution sell, is that ultimately sovereignty is with the people. What does that mean? It means that the people allow the government to exist. Not states, not individuals, people. The people of the United States. It's the first 3 words in the Constitution. We the people. Not we the states. We the people of the United States. A federal system of national and state shared power, like a layer cake. Layers. Does that sound familiar? It's like a Smith Island cake of government. Nobody eats Smith Island cake. You do? Where? Oh, how many calories per slice? Ton. Yeah, I love Smith Island cake. Anyway. It's frozen? That's good. So you've got a federal system of shared power. National responsibility, state responsibility. Separate powers, concurrent powers. Oh, I know this is all review for you. You've got 3 branches of government, each with their own responsibilities, but balances between those branches to prevent any one branch from gaining too much power and influence. The president can veto Congress, but Congress can override that veto. Spending originates in Congress because that's the elected representatives of the people, and that's their money. But the president has to sign spending bills. If the president gets out of control, Congress can impeach the president. The trial is in the House, the vote to remove is in the Senate. Just because a president is impeached doesn't mean they are removed from office. Impeachment is the trial. Then you have a vote to remove. There have only ever been 2 presidents impeached in American history. Who are they? Clinton, yes. Nixon, no. Johnson, Andrew Johnson. Richard Nixon resigned before he could be impeached. There was a vote to impeach him, and realizing that he would never survive an impeachment, Richard Nixon resigned, mainly so he could keep his government pension and Secret Service detail. Because if he was impeached and then removed from office, he would lose all of that. Yeah.
Andrew Johnson impeached but not removed?
He was impeached but acquitted by 1 vote.
Oh.
Acquitted means found not guilty or not enough evidence to remove. But yeah, it was a close one.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton was a lot more. I mean, it didn't even come close to removing Bill Clinton from office. What did who do? Andrew Johnson was charged with violating a law called the Tenure of Office Act, which was basically a trick or a stunt by the Republicans in Congress to trick him into violating a law that they knew he would violate. It required the president to seek the Senate's approval before firing a cabinet member. And since Andrew Johnson was a Democrat and inherited Abraham Lincoln's Republican cabinet when Lincoln was assassinated, they all knew that Johnson wanted to fire the cabinet and name his own cabinet. So knowing that, they put that law in place, and when he tried to fire a cabinet member, they charged him. Why he was charged.
Well, yeah, but no.
He wasn't removed from office because he was acquitted. They didn't. The Senate was not convinced that the Tenure of Office Act was a viable law, and in fact, the judiciary overturned the Tenure of Office Act as unconstitutional later on down the road. Yeah.
Did they go on to abuse him because?
Oh yeah, Andrew Johnson was miserable as president. It didn't help that he was a Southerner. It didn't help that he was a drunk. It didn't help that he was a Democrat in a Republican administration. I mean, that was Lincoln's big opportunity right there in 1864 to unify the country at the end of the Civil War, put a Democrat on the ticket, put a Southerner on the ticket with a Northern Republican, and unify the country. It was actually called the Union Ticket in 1864. But nobody ever in a million years dreamed that Tennessean Andrew Johnson would become president. Yeah, KD.
I don't know.
Look it up.
The answer, which is on the test, is that he committed perjury. He lied under oath. Now, what he lied about, that will never be on a test. But, ever in a million years. But, he committed perjury under oath during a deposition. And the Republicans saw that as an opportunity to, get him out, too. All right. Judges named by the president, approved by Congress. Treaties negotiated by the president, approved by the Senate. No one branch can act independently without a check or a balance from the other branches. I mean, great case in point, Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, as it's really called. The president wants it. Congress voted on it. The Supreme Court upheld it as constitutional. You got 3 branches of government that gave a check mark to it. It's law. Whether you like it or not, it's law. Because the system worked. Now, guys, don't write all that down. Don't, for God's sakes, write all that down. I'm just showing you the separation of powers between the legislature, the executive, and and the judicial. Okay? All that is just showing you that each branch of government has respective powers that balance, complement, check one another. Okay? The Constitution, there's a reason why the Constitution has endured for 230 years. It is a brilliant document. It is brilliant. Now, there are going to be people who are in favor of this document. There are going to be people who are wary of this document, suspect of this document, and distrust this entire process. They are divided into two camps: Federalists and anti-Federalists. How creative. Federalists generally tend to be the people in favor of the Constitution. The wealthy, the elites, the educated, people with ties to trade, commerce, law, business, landowners, people with the most to lose, who want stability. They are your Federalists, your artisans, your craftsmen, the people who are urbanized. And if you actually look here, Federalist influence in orange is mainly along the coast, where the most money, power, and influence is. The people who are opposed to the Constitution, the poor, the farmers, your Daniel Shays of the world, live more toward the interior of the country. They are the people who are distrustful of authority and believe that local rule works best. They are fearful of the elites and believe that the elite and the powerful will somehow take advantage of the poor people. They are also concerned at the lack of a Bill of Rights on this Constitution. So the Constitutional Convention says, you want a Bill of Rights? Fine, here's a Bill of Rights for you. Bill of Rights. How's that for you? If you were to take a vote in 1787, I would say that the majority of people would oppose the Constitution. The majority of people in America are small, poor farmers, not rich, wealthy elites. So if that's the case, then how in the world did this Constitution come into being if the majority of people don't want it? They're not the ones in power. They didn't vote on it. This was not put up for a vote. States held conventions. The state legislatures, mainly made up of elites, chose delegates, generally elites, to meet and discuss and vote on this Constitution. So the elites wrote it, and the elites voted on it. And that's how you get the Constitution. That's how you get around the average Joe. Because otherwise, the average Joe is going to be building a monorail in a town that doesn't need a monorail system. Anti-federalist sentiment is rabid and loud. This is what the anti-federalists are concerned about. One, that the Constitutional Convention was illegal. It went outside the bounds of the Articles of Government. So the entire process itself was illegal. Second, it undermines the prerogatives of state and local authority. By granting so much power to the national government, states and local governments would be subsumed by what the national government decided. The ratification process, they believed, was irregular. The fact that the people were not allowed to vote on this Constitution, that states elected delegates to vote on this Constitution, that was irregular. They did not know what that was. A president? A person who has the ability to, one person with the ability to check the legislature and command the military? That sounds a heck of a lot like a monarch, a king. People had no idea what a president was, and they were very distrustful of the idea of a president, because it sounded like a king. And who's to say that this president wouldn't just, get his son elected president? That would never happen. Oh, no, but not just him. Him. You got two father-son teams, the Adamses and the Bushes, and they're related. They all trace their ancestry back to the Puritans. And then you've got a grandfather-grandson team, William Henry and Benjamin. Then you've got 6 cousins, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. Yeah. How what? How do I remember all that? Because my master's degree is in presidential history. This is my bailiwick. Grover Cleveland was elected, then unelected, then re-elected. Yes, the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, which is why I thought if Obama had lost in 12, that he could run again in 16 and maybe win. That was an opportunity for that to happen, because Grover Cleveland was a guy in his 40s when he was first elected president, like 47 or 48. Anyway, but he liked sausage and fly fishing. Anyway, I don't know, I did a paper on Grover Cleveland. Whatever, okay? Okay, the man liked to fly fish. The anti-federalists are concerned that there needs to be a Bill of Rights, and indeed, in 1788, you get amendments 1 through 10 added to the Constitution right from the get-go. So when you're voting on ratification of the Constitution, you're voting on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And how many states do you need to ratify this document out of the 13? 9. They hold state conventions to ratify, and the first state to ratify it is Delaware. State number 2, Pennsylvania. State number 3, New Jersey. Georgia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, South Carolina is state number 8. You need 9. So the pivotal state becomes Virginia. Where Patrick Henry, before the American Revolution, said, no taxation without representation, give me liberty or give me death. Yeah, Patrick Henry is still alive, and he considers the Constitutional Convention to be a den of rats. He says, I smell a rat. I smell an attempt by the elites to take over this government, and he urges the Virginia legislature to vote against the Constitution. Knowing that Virginia is pivotal to this entire endeavor, they enlist preeminent Virginians to argue for the Constitution. George Washington, he's at the head of the Constitutional Convention, so he's in favor of it. But the intellectual argument for the Constitution is made by the author, James Madison. Little Jemmy Madison. Now, the belief is that if the ninth state ratifies it, states 10 through 13 are not going to want to sit on the outside looking in. They'll just join, with the momentum. But you got to get that ninth state. And at the time, Virginia and New York were stalled in their negotiations. So Madison, Hamilton, and others, but mainly Madison and Hamilton, write a series of newspaper articles that put together are known as the Federalist Papers. They are the argument for the Constitution. And there are several key arguments in the Federalist Papers. One, that you can have a balance of national and state control without stepping on one another. That you need security for democracy. And probably the greatest argument for the Constitution is the idea of variety and diversity. That our variety and diversity is our strength. It is our greatest strength. Because no one group can dominate. No one religion can dominate. No one ethnic group can dominate. No one region can dominate. No one class of people can dominate. Madison's argument here that diversity is strength, and that in order to get anything done, you're going to have to make friends with other people and form coalitions. He says that is the surest way to guarantee everybody's voice is heard. And generally, it works. If you look at the Democratic Party today, look at who it's made up of. Look at all the different groups that make up the Democratic Party. If you look at the Republican Party today, look at all the variety of people who are in the Republican Party. The clash of private interest, good for society. I'm doing my thing, you're doing your thing, we're clashing with one another, but that equals progress. Because I'm trying to be better than you, you're trying to be better than me, we're improving, we're improving, we're improving. Huh? It's kind of like the space race, yeah. Eventually in the 1950s. Yeah, clash of private interest. And religious pluralism, that's just a fancy word for, I'm just coming up with different ways of saying the same thing. But religious variety, political variety, ethnic variety, it's all good. And it is the Federalist Papers, and predominantly this argument about diversity, that convinces states like Virginia and New York and New Hampshire and eventually Rhode Island and North Carolina. North Carolina, I think, was the last of the 13 states. Matter of fact, North Carolina was so late to the game, they didn't even vote in the first presidential election. It's like, dude, man, what are you waiting for? Huh?
What are they doing?
They were just hanging there. But if you take a look at the first electoral college map in 1789, all the states are represented but North Carolina. North Carolina's a blank. And so, in 1789, early 1789, like late winter 1789, the ninth state ratifies the Constitution, Virginia ratifies it, all the other states kind of fall into line, save North Carolina, and you get what most people consider to be a conservative triumph. Not conservative like today's conservative in the idea of limiting radical ideas, limiting instability. Conservative meaning calm, stability. to reduce the power and influence of the mobocracy. And if you take a look at how the Constitution is structured, you can see where people's ability to decide are curbed. You curb democracy in the Constitution. Do you vote for Supreme Court justices? No. But they're one of the three branches of government. Do you vote for president? Not really. You vote, but ultimately your vote is taken into consideration by the Electoral College. They choose the president. December 13th. Do you vote for Senate?
Yes.
Today you do, because of the 17th Amendment, ratified in the early 1900s. But when the Constitution was first written, senators were chosen by state legislatures, not by the people. The only branch of government elected directly by the people is the House of Representatives. You limit democracy. This is where the people have a voice. And it's the reason why they only have a 2-year term. Because if the people choose unwisely, you only have to wait around 2 years to get rid of them. Senate, 6 years. President, 4 years. No term limits. Now, with the president, what winds up happening is you've got a ballot with names on it, and the Electoral College chooses 2. And each elector chooses 2. And the top vote getter overall becomes the president. The second highest number of votes becomes vice president. And it works great when you've got President George Washington and Vice President John Adams, considering they're of the same political ilk. But when you've got Federalist President John Adams and Democratic Republican Vice President Thomas Jefferson, problem. And so this is ultimately going to need to be fixed. And it is fixed in 1804. It's the 12th Amendment to the Constitution. It allows the number 1 to pick the number 2. Well, the number 1, the president, picks the number 2, picks his vice presidential running mate, and you vote for the ticket.
Wouldn't this, maybe inspire assassinations? If people wanted.
What? You get an unsavory vice president in there trying to become...
If you get an unsavory president, you want the vice president in office.
Yeah, could. I don't know. If you go back and look at that Kennedy Johnson thing. All those conspiracy theories out there. Anyway, so direct democracy, people power is limited under the Constitution to limit the passions of the people. And you get a Bill of Rights. Okay? And everybody, look, you've all been in government. You should know what's in the Bill of Rights. Freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, to keep the King of England and the President of the United States out of your face. You can't put troops in people's houses. That goes back to the pre-American Revolution British policy. You have to have a trial by jury. That goes back to the Vice Admiralty courts and the Enforcement of the Navigation Act. You have to be told what the charges are, habeas corpus. That goes back to prior to the American Revolution. You don't have to incriminate yourself. That's the Fifth Amendment. You have the right to a speedy trial. You have a right to face your accuser. A lot of amendments 4 through 8 are reactions to British policy between the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. And then, these are really great. rights not mentioned go to the people. Any powers not delegated go to the states or the people. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Harvest for the hungry. We are collecting candy